Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Okay.
I anticipate no problems.
I anticipate
except
problems
for that.
all the time. We've already screwed it up.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody, to the Wordy Pair Podcast. These two screw-ups are back after a little bit of a Christmas season hiatus, and
yes, a
we've got something for you that we hope you'll find interesting. We're going to be talking about Phantom of the Opera, the book, which until recently I didn't realize was actually like a classic piece of, I guess you call it gothic horror, but like I thought it was just like some stupid musical, and like anyway, as always, I'm Rudy.
And I'm Justin.
And that's what we're talking about today. This very
The Wordy
strange
Pair
book.
descends upon the opera to hunt down phantoms.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there was a lot of hunting of phantoms and not really a lot of finding until the very end of the book.
Yeah, so this book in particular, I mean, it's no Dracula. I'm going to say that up front.
Yeah.
I liked I think it's one of those books where I really, really liked the beginning, and then the closer it got, like the further it got towards the end, the more I started to be like, all right, just kind of get it over with. But
yeah. In the way that the Dracula was a slow burn leading to an explosion, this is a slow burn leading to a fizzle in more ways than one, actually.
Yeah.
In both the literal and figurative senses, this is true.
So
Narratively, it starts out very interesting because we have a lot of mystery boxes that get shown to us at the very beginning of the book, and we have our narrator who's basically supposed to be like a journalist who's been trying to like piece together what actually happened, and that's kind of who the narrator is through most of the story. And we get a lot of little, like, here's this character that we're going to talk about later, and here's this guy, and here's this guy. And then we start getting into, like, some actually kind of fun stuff where we're learning about, like, how the Phantom operates in the opera.
Yeah, I think what really... Because I remember I was halfway through this book, and I was like, yeah, you should read it. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
The way the book starts out is very much like an Arsène Lupin novel.
Yes.
In the sense that there is this character who is gleefully doing what he wants to do, and nobody knows how to stop him or who he is. And
yeah, lots of
his
mystery, all of
his plans
confusion.
seem to just fall into place no matter what anyone tries to do to stop him.
Yes.
And it takes a much different turn than an Arsène Lupin story towards the end. I mean, it is a French story. It's written by Gaston Leroux.
Yeah.
But there's a meme that comes to mind. I'm trying to remember exactly how it goes. It's like Britain, France, America, and Russia, and the different types of literature they have.
Ah.
I think British literature was I Will Die for Honor, French was I Will Die for Love, American was I Will Die for Freedom,
yeah,
and then Russian was just I Will Die, which, I mean, it really rings true on all four parts.
Yeah.
with the possible exception of American literature in the past 100 years, but...
Well, yeah, this is a meme of olden times.
Yeah, but it holds true for the French part of that meme in a lot of classic French works. Even
Sure.
Arsène Lupin, that was the big thing about Lupin is that he is a character who is a bit more of a romantic than Sherlock Holmes is
Yeah.
in the English novels. So in this novel, it starts in a way that kind of leans towards that, and you're not sure who is doing what or who is loyal to who.
Or
And
even,
as
or even who actually exists, and it's possible that the Phantom is a figment of someone's plans or something like that, a
yeah,
scapegoat, so to speak.
yeah, and some of the characters, it almost seems like, oh wait, are they an ally of the Phantom? And I mean, this is a pretty old story, so spoiling it doesn't matter.
Right. We're gonna assume that. I mean, here's the thing, right? It's a classic book, but it's a classic book from over 100 years ago. We're going to spoil things in it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't also read it, because classic books are worth reading just to understand the techniques.
That said, there are mysteries that get exposed, so this is the
Sure.
point
I
at
mean, I
which
should
you
hope
should pick
so.
up the book and turn the volume down.
Yeah.
And if not, then, well, yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
So,
So.
you've read it more recently than me because I read it like over half a year ago.
Mhm.
And I'm really having trouble remembering how all the traps were explained at the end. Or not
Well,
traps, all of the little tricks. So that's the part that's I'm
they
going to
were
struggle
almost
with a
all
bit here, but
trapdoors of one sort, of one
yeah.
sort or another.
Yeah, they
So,
weren't like super-duper clever. They were just like, this was a trapdoor, and this was a trapdoor,
and this
and
was
you get
also
a
a trapdoor,
trapdoor, and
and
you
here,
get a trapdoor.
yeah, it was very Oprah-esque,
Yeah.
only with trapdoors.
Yeah, so it wasn't quite
Which I
as
mean would be an
clever.
episode of the Oprah Winfrey Show that I might watch.
The Phantom of the Oprah.
Yes, and you get a trapdoor, and just members of the audience are vanishing.
Yeah, as fans of Umineko, there's a lot to be said about certain rules of writing detective stories, which some people like to adhere to. And one of those rules is it's in the Knox Decalogue, correct? With
Yeah, I believe so.
where you can't just have the solution be a trapdoor that the reader was never aware of to begin with.
Right? Yeah.
But in the Phantom of the Opera, we can let it slide because it's not a mystery story
No,
too
not
much. I mean, there's
not
mystery
really.
to it.
There are mystery elements to it, but the way that the story runs out, it's not really a mystery. I mean, you kind of know that there's going to be some kind of large brouhaha right from the beginning because it's foreshadowed. The book is written in the form of basically a journalist's statements about trying to understand what the hell happened that caused this uproar at the opera, basically.
Yeah, and as you said, there's a bit of a there's definitely a bit of a fizzling out at one point in the story, which could have been a much bigger uproar, all things considered.
Right, right.
So the broad view of the story is one that starts out as a person unknown is causing a bit of
Well,
there's a
I
bit
mean,
of pranking going on at the beginning of the story, and then it kind of evolves into
well, it's a little more complicated than that, right? Because it starts out with basically
it starts out with new ownership of the opera. That's the important thing.
new management, I think, is the better way to put it. But basically, there's new management at the opera, and there's always been kind of this undercurrent of like, oh, there's the opera ghost. The opera ghost did it. The opera ghost did this. The opera ghost did that. And it's one of those things where the new managers of the opera are like, oh, come on, this opera ghost thing is fake. It's, someone having fun, making fun of us or something like that. And we're not going to really, humor that. New management is not the same as the old management. But then you start to find out things that, like, no, in fact, the old management was paying him 20,000 francs a month, which was quite a sum at the time.
Well, it's important to note, like, that this was... what starts out as seemingly innocent pranks or possibly just, people collaborating to have this opera ghost's, what's the word I'm looking for? Superstition.
Yeah.
It escalates when the new owners receive what is essentially blackmail demands. Not blackmail demands, but, well, pretty much. It's like, give me money or things will happen.
Give me money and keep my opera box, unsold for me, basically. But, like... But the funny thing about it is that it's not new blackmail, right? The thing about it that's strange is that it's old blackmail that's being renewed, right? That, like, it's been happening for a long time, right? This particular opera box was kept unsold by the previous management. And so everybody's like, yeah, I mean, did anyone ever see the ghost actually use the box? No. Well, I mean, maybe he's not using it. And so like, well, we're just going to sell box number 5 then, and, we'll see what happens. And then they get this letter. And the letter is like, it's very cordial, but it is in essence a blackmail letter. It's the bottom line is, if you want things to go well, you will send me 20,000 francs a month in a way that I will explain to you how to do it, and you will keep this particular opera box unsold for me, unsold so that I may use it at my leisure. And they're kind of like, ha ha ha, very funny. And they decide to like, oh, we're not going to do any of that. And then things start to go wrong.
Quite wrong, actually. I believe... So this is my favorite part of the story, simply because of all the things that are going wrong and how misleading it was towards the character of the rest of the story after that point. I loved the way that the managers were basically driven insane by this opera ghost. They were determined to catch whoever was behind this. Yeah. And they tried everything they could think of. And the things that started happening were ridiculous to a level of like, someone went on stage to sing, and they tried to sing, and all that happened was everyone heard a frog croaking.
Yeah.
And this was like, nobody could figure out how it worked. Nobody could figure out what was happening. I believe one of the MVP of the singers, if you will, I believe she was either forced out or quit or something.
She was terrified of making more frog noises.
Yeah.
And so she basically went into hiding.
Noises.
Yeah. There was all kinds of interesting, kind of fun stuff that happened early on in the story. There's a lot of people who claim that they like interacted with the opera ghost, but all of their descriptions are very confusing at best and like misleading at worst, right? Where they're like, yeah, I go into the box and I hear a voice, and the voice tells me to put the thing on the shelf and then walk away, and then I walk away and I walk back and it's gone. But I didn't see anybody walk past me, so I don't know, right? There's clearly something funky going on, and either some group of people are lying, or and that's really what the management kind of thinks originally. Is they're like, well, there's this one old woman who the opera ghost uses to, transfer the 200 or the 20,000 francs to himself, and we think it's actually her taking the money. And so we're going to investigate that. And like, no, it's not her. And she's like, no, I've never seen him. I just hear voices. And it's like, you hear voices. And there's implications that come with that. Hearing voices that no one else does.
Yeah. Well, they end up firing her, actually, and then things keep happening.
For a time, yeah.
Yeah, and the ghost of the opera is actually the one that leaves a nice little letter saying, hey, you're going to bring her back. You understand me? So there's definitely a lot going on where these new managers kind of realize that, oh, we've bought into more than we can chew here, haven't we?
Yeah.
I mean, they even go to the old management. They think that everyone is playing a prank on them, because the old managers are like, no, you want to pay the ghost. Definitely pay the ghost. And they're like, okay, so everyone is in on this. Like they were paranoid throughout that entire part of the story. It was fantastic, and it was kind of funny, and it was highly entertaining and amusing. And you were just kind of waiting to see, well, what is actually going on here? Like what is the deal with the fandom of the opera? Is he just someone who really likes the opera, and so he kind of just makes it his playhouse? And in the end, it's all innocent, and it's kind of like an Arsène Lupin thing, where it's just like, this is the way I want to live my life. I like the opera. I'm going to be the opera ghost. And then it takes a really dark turn, and that is not the case at all.
Right. Well,
so
we kind of interleaved into the management being confused and angry. We kind of get the hints of a fairly typical romance going on. There's a guy who's the younger brother of a count, basically.
Yeah,
he's a viscount, I believe, and he is enamored with this one particular singer, and to call it melodramatic, I think, is not overselling it. It is pretty melodramatic in a lot of places. There are people who are, and I mean that in almost like a stage play kind of way, in the sense that like in the book itself, there are scenes where like a person is like ranting angrily 1 second and then weeping the next second, with practically no interval in between.
Now, this is classic French literature.
Yeah, I guess I don't know a lot about French literature other than the Lupin stuff that I've read, and that stuff's never melodramatic. It's dramatic, but not
it is
melodramatic.
very much like that, where Lupin will be in one mood in 1 second, and then he'll be in another completely different mood the next second, and nothing will have happened to instigate that.
I guess, yeah. I mean, yeah.
This
to
is
a
very
certain
much a
degree.
thing you'll see a lot of in French classical literature.
I see. So the issue with the woman that this guy is trying to court is that she's like, it's not that she's in love with the opera ghost, but that it seems that like it's been very strongly implied by the opera ghost that he won't teach her to sing anymore if she is unfaithful to him in this kind of weird pseudo romantic sense.
Yeah.
It's weird because like he at this part of the story he's not yet made any actual like advances on this woman. He's just teaching her how to sing. But like at the same time there's like that implied, well, don't you go, get engaged to any other man kind of thing. It's very weird and a little bit, and this is where things start to get a little bit creepy too.
Yeah, just a little.
Aside from the melodrama, which is a little bit almost, I'd say, humorous at times.
Yeah.
We have this because we don't know how deep it goes, and we don't know how, like, is the ghost just trying to keep her to himself, like as a friend, as a friendly companion? What are his actual goals here? And at the early part of the story, it seems like his goals might be fairly benign. That does not remain the case later in the story.
Not by a long shot.
No.
Yeah, he's teaching her how to sing, and she views him as her angel.
Right.
But
she has kind of a history. Her father was a musician, a violin player, right?
Yeah.
And he had he taught her some kind of mythology about like the angel of music. And, there was a bunch of mumbo jumbo about the angel of music, and basically the opera ghost posed as the angel of music to her. And it's kind of iffy because it's like she's like, oh no, he's not the angel of music, but he is my angel of music kind of thing going on, right? Like he's never said I am the angel of music, but she kind of seems to assume that he is. There's a lot of assuming going on.
Yeah, she makes a ton of assumptions at the beginning, and
Yeah.
it doesn't play out very well for her.
For anybody.
Yeah. There's that whole thing where I forget where they went, but he's playing violin music at one point
At the church, right?
Yeah, and the Viscount is acknowledging the talent of the musician.
Yeah.
And everyone is, throughout the story, or at least the parts where music is happening, they're in awe of the ability of this ghost to create music and to teach someone to become such a great singer. Because, the woman that was pushed out from humiliation with the frog voice, that was the opera ghost's way of installing the girl that he was teaching.
Yeah. As the
in
lead
order
singer.
to show that she was actually pretty talented. So he gave her a spotlight and allowed her to sing there, and she became famous because of it.
Yeah.
And she was reluctant to do anything to risk losing that after that point, and so she remained for quite some time very loyal to this ghost person teaching her to sing.
Right.
Now, it has been a while since I've read it. This is the part I'm a bit iffy on. I know that there's a bunch of stuff that happened with, like, a party, and the Phantom was likely there, but he was in a mask because everyone was in a mask. And so there were things that were happening where the Viscount was very suspicious of what was going on with this girl, and he kind of thought he had to come to her rescue.
Yeah,
so he was trying.
She kind of tells him to come follow her in secret. She's kind of trying to, like, low key help him figure out who the ghost is, so that she can figure out whether, what his actual intentions are. There's this whole scene set up where there's a costume ball, and the Viscount comes in with his mask, and he finds the woman, and she like, okay, follow me, and she goes off to some other place, and he basically sees someone that he thinks is the opera ghost, and kind of loses him basically. It's a weird scene.
Yeah, there's a chase scene and everything, and some of the motivations for why people are doing things in these scenes doesn't make sense. Like, I wasn't even really clear on why it was so important for everyone to be running around on the rooftops of the opera house trying to figure out where this guy was.
Yeah.
Because like 3 or 4 people joined in that chase at one point. It's just like, what is going on here?
Well, there's also some interesting imagery that's happening, right? Because like apparently the opera ghost has some kinds of talents of like, what would you call it? Like special effects talents.
He's very good at manipulating sound and visuals in the opera theater because he is very intimately familiar with the building itself.
But he can also like make himself appear as a skull or like with glowing eyes kind of thing. There's some weirdness there that I didn't quite. It wasn't concluded in a way that I found satisfactory to my understanding of it, and that might be intentional to make it kind of nebulous or mysterious, but. Yeah. There's a lot of sightings of the opera ghost, and we alternately get descriptions of like, oh, it was simply a skull, or it was a thin man who had a mask on his face, or oh, all I saw were his 2 glowing eyes, things like that. There's a lot of confusion about when and where and the appearance of the opera ghost throughout the first half of the story, and a little bit more than that too. So whenever he shows up, you're never quite sure whether it's him or whether it's some kind of a trick or whether it's someone being mistaken for him. That kind of thing is kind of left open for the reader to kind of ponder a little bit.
And it's kind of strange and it's kind of weird. And then there's a death takes place. The Viscount, his cousin or the Count essentially suspects. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is one of the parts I don't remember clearly. So basically, one of them suspected the other of being the ghost.
Yeah.
And trying to elope.
Well, so that happens later. Well, the first thing that really kind of tells you that the opera ghost isn't playing around is that there's an opera going on, and a chandelier falls from the ceiling and smashes and kills a couple of people and injures many of them also. And it's interesting. This is another one of those things that's kind of left ambiguous because it's implied that this was part of the opera ghost's plans, but at the same time they do like they have the police investigate and they say no, it was just a naturally broken thing up at the top. No ghost here. But at the same time, it was exactly what the ghost wanted to happen, and so it's like, well, was it or wasn't it? You know?
Yeah. And it further drove the managers a little crazy.
Yeah, and this is the first time that you see that the ghost isn't playing around, right? Like he's not just ooh hoo hoo ha 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 funny croaky noises. He's like, there's a very good chance that he had a hand in several deaths and several dozen major injuries, and it could have been worse too. The chandelier coming down could have set the whole building on fire. So we kind of get this hint that. Like, as the story goes on, the ghost becomes less playful and more serious and more dangerous. Well,
it's not just that, because the story starts off kind of fun and weird.
Yeah.
And then it gets pretty dark and really weird.
Yeah.
Especially when the Viscount finally starts tracking down the ghost and what's going on with him. Now the Count does die, correct?
No, I don't think so.
I don't know why I remember one of them dying, but
they think someone says he did, but like I think he just left in the carriage, and I could be wrong about this, but I think that I'm not sure, but my recollection is that the Count basically left in a hurry, and him leaving in a hurry was a catalyst for the Viscount thinking that he was the ghost going to go deal with the woman that he's courting.
Ah, okay, yeah.
I think that's what happened.
It's it was a strange part of the story where, like, you could see a lot of misdirection starting to happen, but it was kind of clear to the reader that this was not the case, that it wasn't it wasn't the Count or the Viscount that were actually the opera ghost.
Yeah.
But there's this point in the story, and, stop me if you think I shouldn't jump ahead this far just yet. There is a point near the middle of the story where the Viscount meets someone who knows the details on the ghost.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost for the entire last half of the book, these two are working together to try and bring down the opera ghost. But he meets him...
You mean the Persian?
Yes, the Persian. Where he meets him is just where the story starts to go a little crazy. And things get really, really wild, because you start to get into this whole basement area of the opera house, and calling it a basement is a woeful understatement for what is really happening here. It's practically an entire underground facility connected to the underground tunnels of France. And it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and there's all these... There's people working underneath the opera house, stoking these furnaces and...
Yeah, so there's a postscript that comes that was in the copy of the book that I had, that's just titled "The Paris Opera House," and it's kind of a short description of what the opera house in Paris was like in real life, and how it was a little bit exaggerated, but not very exaggerated in the story. Basically, it's like an entire underground city almost. Like, it has, it's designed so that you can move a 50-foot round stage up and down. It has places for horses to live and the people who take care of them. It has quarters for all of the singers and all of the other actors, for the musicians. And then not only are there these, places that you kind of make sense, but there's also a lot of places or a lot of places that nobody knows what the heck they're there for, kind of thing. And so, like, so I guess we can, if we're going to talk about the Persian a little bit, we can kind of say that what's going on basically is that the Phantom of the Opera turns out to be a man who is especially good at building and maintaining secret doors and things like that, hidden tunnels and things.
Yes, and he is nuttier than a fruitcake.
Incredibly so, yes.
Yeah, when the Viscount meets the Persian, you just find out almost immediately from the Persian, oh yeah, this guy's Looney Tunes. He one of the first things you find out is one of the very few things that the Persian doesn't even tell the Viscount.
Right.
You find out that the Phantom is this guy named Eric, who used to be, I believe he was part of or worked for nobility, and he used to enjoy torturing people that he didn't like, and for some reason he was incredibly good at lassoing, because there's this long-winded scene where the Persian keeps reminding the Viscount to keep his gun level with his eyes, and he repeats it a dozen times before you're in the Persian's thoughts at this point.
Yeah,
he keeps repeating this line to the Viscount to keep his gun level with his eyes over and over and over again, and then you hear the Persian's thoughts, his inner monologue, talking about how he's warning this Viscount to do this because he knows that Eric, the Phantom of the Opera, is named Eric. He knows that Eric is a dangerous man, and he knows that he is a master of the lasso, and he could easily kill either of them quickly in the darkness just by lassoing around their neck, and by keeping their guns level with their eyes, they would at least have a fighting chance if he tried that, where their arm would be caught in the lasso and they'd be able to keep themselves from choking.
Right. So that's the...
It's a very strange thing.
It's a very strange thing, but it doesn't take very long for Raoul, who is the Viscount, to say, like, this gun doesn't even look like it'll work. Why are we carrying this thing around? He's like, oh, it's not about the gun. It's about putting your hand there. Just keep your hand there. You don't need the gun. Just point. It's fine. Just keep your hand at the level of your eyes, close to your head, and don't take it away from there ever. And it's explained later in the book that if someone lassos you around the neck, but also gets your arm in there. You can always use your arm to loosen the lasso as long as it's on the inside. But if it's on the outside, you could be, asphyxiated before you realize it.
Yeah, and it's very descriptive of the Persian, whose name I can't remember.
He was pretty much just called the Persian.
Yeah. Yeah, he was very descriptive about how Eric used to lasso people and torture and kill them for sport, essentially.
Yeah.
I forget who he was working for, though.
He worked for like a sultanate down in the like the what would be now called the Middle East.
Yeah.
He worked for some kind of royalty down there, and he was their trapdoor man. And then basically they started to realize what he was doing with all of his trapdoors, and they were like, "We're going to kill you." And he's like, "But I don't want to die." And basically the Persian helped him get away.
Yeah, so the Persian knows exactly who the opera ghost is.
Right.
And for the longest time, he wasn't telling anyone simply because he had rescued this man, and he kind of had a bit of sympathy for him. But the more that he saw him doing, the more he was starting to think, no, this guy is just mad and he needs to be stopped. And so when Raoul shows up and says, I'm looking for this guy, I need to stop him, he's kidnapped someone that I am trying to rescue, the Persian is like, okay, I'm going to help you. And maybe we can talk some sense into him because he owes me one. But this does not appear to be the case because there's several points at which it's clear that the Phantom is aware of their presence in this underground terrain, which spreads to all these different places, including across an underground lake.
Yeah.
Wherein I believe it was the Persian who nearly dies because he gets pulled. Was it him or Raoul that got pulled into the lake and narrowly escaped?
It was Raoul that got pulled into the lake, but they both nearly die a couple of times in this last part of the book.
Yeah, there's so much going on that's just so weird in this underground facility. The Phantom has these rooms set up where there's different atmospheres and different ways of controlling the temperature. And all these weird trap doors that make it so, like, at one point they're trapped in a room that just keeps getting hotter and hotter. But it's also supposed to be, because of the theater nature of the Phantom, it's a desert, essentially. And so they're literally walking along sand in a room that's...
Well, they hallucinate that, but yeah.
Was that a hallucination?
Yeah, I mean, the room itself was a tiny little six-sided room with a metal tree in the middle of it, and only because they were hallucinating from being so thirsty and hot, and because the walls were mirrored, they kind of visualized themselves as if in a desert looking for an oasis.
Oh, I could have sworn I read something about how at one point the room changed scenery as if there were mechanisms that could change it to look more like a jungle or a desert, but maybe
I took that to be a hallucination.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, either way works, I guess. But yeah, it just goes from like being a very playful story to this very weird story where this guy has all of these mechanisms and trapdoors and at his disposal, and he's a complete madman who lassos people, for whatever reason. And the character of the Phantom kind of jumps around a bit, but you see it start to settle in the funnel where it comes closer to the end of the story.
Yeah,
his personality kind of starts to funnel down where you start to see what's really going on, which I don't know if we want to jump ahead to that just yet either, but I'm going to go ahead and say that I kind of laughed at the end when everything came to fruition and all was said and done.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, there's a lot we can say about that underground facility. The way that it was described by Raoul as he was traveling through it, it really did have like a dark and dismal atmosphere to it, where he was describing all the people working under the opera house, and it really it had like an underworld atmosphere where it was almost like descending into some other dimension or something.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of Lewis Carroll to it.
Yeah, it was very good descriptions of what was going on there. Yeah, I mean, that's it's not my favorite part of the story, but that's definitely one of the reasons that, even if you know what happens in the story from us telling you, it's worth reading just for things like that. It's very well
there's
written.
there's a lot of really good descriptive language. There's a lot of, I mean, this is not the book that I would necessarily say is the masterclass in like dialogue.
Yeah, and dialogue especially.
Like yeah, I mean, if you're learning dialogue from this book, you're probably looking in the wrong place. But if you're looking for like descriptive language of like places, this is a good place for that. If you're looking for interesting pacing, because I'm not going to say necessarily that it's like well paced, but like the pacing changes around enough that you're never really quite sure what's going to happen next, and you never really get lulled into a state of.
You're not really expecting things to happen next when they do. They may or may not. It's kind of a roller coaster.
But like you're always expecting something to happen soon. Like you're never brought into a state. You never feel leisurely reading the book, right? There's always like, well, what the hell's going to happen next, kind of thing going on, and like the angry the emotion with which you say what the hell's going to happen next varies throughout the book, but it's a consistent feeling.
Yeah, so
because you're right. I mean, early on it is very playful and almost like it's a big prank, and then things kind of escalate and escalate and escalate until we've got the whole opera on the line effectively, and hundreds of people.
Yeah, and there's something crazy, like 30 different twists and turns for the direction that things are going in this story. Not in the sense that like they make you think one thing is happening and then another, just that one thing is happening and then it goes to another, and you're like, wait, how did we end up here? Wait, huh?
Yeah.
And not in a bad way either. I mean, it all is one, straight line from the start to the end of the story. It's not that it doesn't make sense. Some of it is very fanciful. But it's following after you see it is following a clear trajectory.
Yeah.
Definitely ends on a bit of a, this kind of ending makes more sense for a more straightforward story, I think. But with everything they threw at you for it to end the way it ended, I was kind of just like chuckling to myself, like, well, I guess it had to end some way. There's this plot that where the Phantom is going to blow up the opera house, and his condition for not blowing it up is that the girl that he's kidnapped has to agree to marry him.
Yeah.
And he gives her the choice in this by giving her two very weird keys, one of which is a scorpion and one of which is, what was it, a tiger? Or a lion?
It was a
locust.
No, grasshopper. A grasshopper, yeah.
A scorpion and a grasshopper. I don't know why I thought lion.
Which is extremely strange. Like the image. First off, you kind of have the image in your head that this is deep underground and there's not much light anyway, and so like the fact that you have like a casket with a grasshopper shaped key in it is like, what? Why would you? First off, how would you get this detail? And second off, why is there this detail here in the first place?
Well, they're just further trying to demonstrate that, this is a guy who messes around with trapdoors and mechanisms, and it's like, okay, I get it, but this key thing is ridiculous. And I didn't quite understand what was being said, how these keys were working, because at one point I'm thinking of, like, it's a grasshopper and a scorpion, but they're, like, on the end of a key, but then they were actually the key itself, and then...
No, as far as I can tell, it's just that he's gonna see which one has been turned.
Yeah, they aren't even very clear on...
It's not like she has to take the key through like an obstacle course and find a slot for it and then put it in there and turn it. It's just like on a desk in the room that she's trapped in.
Yeah, and he's like, which one you gonna touch? And he doesn't tell her which one is the good response or the bad response. Not that
he does, but she doesn't believe him.
Well, yeah, there's that too, because it's clear that he's planning on blowing up the opera house, and she doesn't know if he actually means it when he says that he won't if she turns a certain one. So she has no idea. And this is kind of resolved by the Phantom himself, who just picks up the one that will blow up the opera house, and is just like, I'm gonna do it. I swear I'll do it.
Yeah.
A lot of crazy things happen in a very, very short time in that moment, up to and including, essentially, she agrees to marry him if he doesn't blow up the opera house and if he saves the two men, the Persian and Raoul.
Yeah.
Because they're in a room underneath or something and they're drowning. And the kegs that are going to explode are there with... Well, no, they're not drowning yet. Wait, how did that work? They were in a room that was flooding. The kegs were elsewhere. But the room that was flooding could also flood the kegs so that they wouldn't explode. And that was the choice being made. But they would also drown. And so that was the deal. It was like, they have to be saved as well. And so she's like, fine, sure, whatever. Let's get it on. And so the Phantom actually rescues those two men and does not blow up the theater. They fizzle out. They were going to explode, but they get flooded so that, like a lot of parts of the story, they kind of fizzle out.
Right. And
this is kind of sort of the ending, but not the actual ending just yet, because this isn't the part that made me laugh. This was just this was like the climax of everything, where you're sitting there reading it and thinking, okay, there's these keys and this explosion is going to happen and she's got a choice to make and these guys are dying. And it's just like, can we put any more slop on top of this, essentially, for this ridiculous situation? And that's kind of what gives the Phantom of the Opera a little something that a lot of other stories don't have, because you've probably seen a similar scenario in 100 different stories, 1,000 probably.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is just so weird, you're not going to forget it necessarily. I mean, that could be good or bad, I guess, but I wouldn't say it was bad. I would definitely say that there was a lot of contrivance in this book, but not so.
I mean, the Phantom of the Opera himself is a creature of contrivance, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of his point, is that he because what he got in trouble for basically was he was working for this sultanate or something, and like they told him to make a certain number of trapdoors and secret doors and stuff, but then he just kept doing it more and more and more. And when they found out that he had like turned their entire castle into like this Swiss cheese of trapdoors and secret tunnels, they're like, okay, we're gonna hang you.
He could not control himself.
Yeah.
I must engineer, for I am an engineer. I mean, I don't know if it's hard to say if I like the character of the Phantom of the Opera or not, because I love the Phantom at the beginning of the book, and by the end of by the middle of the book, I'm like, oh, he's kind of just a monster, really. And then by the end of the book, it's like I don't want to say I feel sorry for him. It's just a little pathetic.
Well, it is, right? It's one of those things where, like,
I mean, that is what it's supposed to be. So it's not like it was. It's not like that wasn't the point of
plan.
It.
Yeah, right.
But this is getting back to that whole French story meme where it's like, I will die for love. After the events, do you want to take that part, or do you want me to?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so after the events at the end of the book, where everything goes down and the opera house is not blown up and people have kind of moved on and the Phantom and the girl went off to be married, he comes back it was the Persian he was visiting, correct?
Yeah.
He comes back to visit him and he's basically dying.
Yeah.
And he starts to tell the Persian the story of everything that happened afterwards, where he was so happy that she agreed to marry him that, he was willing to basically do anything for her after that. And they kind of just embraced and wept, and he described her as genuinely weeping and feeling sorry for him, and it was the first time he'd ever experienced anyone feeling like that for him. And so now he was like madly in love with her, and he it broke his heart so much that he was now dying he was dying from love. This is the absolute most French thing that can happen in a book. So he comes back to tell the Persian that all is well, I'll be letting her run off with her beloved Raoul, and I'm probably going to die because I'm just so touched by what happened. And that's
Oh, I die, Horatio.
Yes, oh, I die, Horatio. And the Persian doesn't call the gendarme or anyone because he just feels so much pity and so much empathy for Eric at that point that he's just like, well, what could I do?
Well, yeah, yeah. It's weird because like he's like, oh, by the way, there'll be a publication in a magazine in 3 weeks that tells you that I'm dead. Just take care of my body when I'm dead. It'll be over here. It's very weird.
Yeah. Yeah, the Phantom has everything engineered up until the very end, and
Yeah, and then some.
And at the end of the book, he's managed to gain sympathy from at least 2 people that we know of. So
Yeah.
I guess if that was his end goal, then success. And then there's like a couple of explanations of the tricks that he used, which all basically came down to trapdoors.
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean,
there's a fun description of how he got the Franks to himself. There's some interesting sleight of hand there.
Yeah.
Oh, what we didn't mention is the fact that throughout this whole book, the Phantom is like writing an opera, but
that
it
is
never
true.
Gets performed.
It never does get performed.
It's called like the Don Juan Triumphant or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. At some point, you get to see several scenes of him like going insane over trying to write this opera and get it to come out perfectly, and he's like. At one minute, he's really happy with whatever her name was from the... I can't remember what the girl's name was.
Christine,
yeah. At one point, he's like really happy with her and really happy to describe this. And then the next, he's flipping out because he just can't get something right. And he's like, no, it has to be perfect. And he is clearly a madman in those moments. And from that point on, you don't have any illusions anymore. It's just like, oh yeah, he's kind of just insane. Because at first in the book, you can kind of think that, well, maybe this is just his way of trying to get love that he has never been able to have before. But then it's just like, no, he's just really greedy. And it's just like, he's just going to take what he wants and he wants that. And
God help you if you turn the grasshopper.
Yeah, don't turn the grasshopper.
It hops jolly high.
It'll hop jolly high. That's right. That was another line that he kept repeating. It was like 3 or 4 times that he said it'll hop higher and higher and it'll hop jolly high.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Persian constantly saying, keep your gun level with your eyes.
Yeah. Or just your hand. It doesn't really matter.
So
it is a bizarre story.
It's one of the most bizarre stories I've ever read without being an outright fantasy novel. And even then, it beats a lot of fantasy novels for just being weird.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. It's so strange the way that the ghost's character develops through the book. Like, it is really kind of a heel turn. Like he seems pretty. How would I describe it?
He seems like a Dennis the Menace, but he's pretty much not. He's a troublemaker, but he's not harmful.
Right, and then he suddenly becomes very harmful.
Incredibly harmful.
And when he gets harmful, he gets even more picturesque. Like the scorpion and grasshopper keys thing was just had my head in my hands as I was reading. It's like, what is is there a book that this is referring to or something? And it's like, as far as I can tell, no. It's just that Gaston Leroux was like, yeah, he'll have these 2 caskets and they have keys in them, and they're made in Japanese bronze, and which one you turn determines your answer. It's like, it's not connected to anything though. It just does.
I mean, this was a place where a simple yes or no would have sufficed. Just like, hey, Christina, we need an answer here.
Here, I'm going to give you a red flag and a white flag, and you just wave the one that you want.
It seems a lot simpler than he made it when you put it like that. Yeah, I can definitely recommend it. It's got a lot of interesting things to it, so I'm not going to say that
No, it's a fun read for sure.
Yeah, it's a fun read. I know I'm dogging on a lot of it, but
it became a classic for, I think, good reason.
Yeah. Yeah, much like Dracula,
it's one of those books where you might not want to sit down and watch a musical adaptation of this book, but actually reading the book itself does not make it feel like the usual super saccharine claptrap that you usually get in musicals.
Because I feel like I can imagine what scenes were not in the opera, if the opera is even remotely close to what happened in the book.
Yeah.
Like, they're definitely not going to have a lot of that stuff with Raoul.
I don't think it's actually an opera. I think it's just a musical.
Yeah, it's a musical, but
it's Andrew Lloyd Webber, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's not. Yeah.
But given the modern age is the one of the universes, when are we going to get the Andrew Lloyd Webber universe, the Webberverse, where we have like a crossover between Phantom of the Opera and Cats?
I mean, at some point, Andrew Lloyd Webber will die, and then 75 years later, his copyrights will run out.
Yes, and then we'll get to read the Phantom of the Opera version where the magical Mr. Mistopheles just like freaked and went crazy on everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we brought up Andrew Lloyd Webber, so I think have we bottomed out?
I mean, Andrew Lloyd Webber is pretty close to the bottom, but like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's there's one other thing I want to make note of, is that there are like police inspectors in this book, and they are completely useless,
Utterly
just as they are
useless.
In like yeah,
more so than in a Lupin book. They
even
actually,
more so than in a Lupin book.
Well, they actually tend to have characters and are a big presence in the Lupin books, but the police in this book are just like, oh, it's Phantom. A couple people are dying. Not really much we can do about it. You know what? This is probably just natural causes.
Yeah. The chandelier is weird because Eric himself is like, "Oh, I didn't do the chandelier. That wasn't me." It's like, but is he lying? Maybe he's lying. Who knows?
Yeah, just a complete lack of interest, like the FBI when there are clear signs.
Right. Or I mean, like the Royal Canadian Mounted Police when there or anything.
Well, you can't expect them to do much about anything. They're in the mountains.
Mounted doesn't mean in the mountains.
But they are in the mountains.
I don't think that's necessarily true. Some of them are.
Well, I'm not referring to the name Mounties. I'm referring to the fact that you always see them pictured like riding horses in the mountains.
Oh, well, fair enough.
At least you did on 80s television a lot.
It is a bizarre book. And the fact that it sits on the same shelf as other gothic horror like Dracula is a little bit like confusing to me, but I guess it does do some of the same things. But if I had to pick, if you put a gun to my head and said, okay, you got to either read Dracula or Phantom of the Opera, I'd pick Dracula 100% of the time.
Look, I think Phantom of the Opera is a good book that's worth reading. Dracula's 10 times better, easily.
Yeah.
It's so much more cerebral. The dialogue is worlds better. The dialogue starts off okay in Phantom of the Opera, and it just slowly degrades towards the end of the book until you're reading a man say, keep your gun level with your eyes, over and over and over. It was like, it must have been 20 times he said it.
Let's see if I can find it here. Hold on, give me a second real quick.
It's a really insane amount of times to say one line without, and he never tells the guy why he's saying it until like, I don't even know if he did actually, now that I think about it.
He does later on. He's like, oh yeah, he'll choke you. I was like, you just told me he'd choke me.
Yeah, because if you lead with that, then you don't have to keep repeating the line, is all I'm saying. If you're like, yeah, you just kind of keep your hand in front of your face so that, you can't be choked to death by a rope, and then you're like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, but I don't know, maybe the Persian was just like, in his head, he was like, okay, so here's what's going to happen if I just tell him that he'll be lassoed. I'm going to say, yeah, he'll lasso you, and he'll be like, who does that? And then it's just going to be a whole thing, and we're going to waste 20 minutes while I explain to him why this man is really good at lassoing people, and we're just going to move on from that.
Yeah. Seeing my pistols, the little Viscount asked me if we were going to fight a duel. I said, yes, and what a duel. But of course, I had no time to explain anything to him. The little Viscount is a brave fellow, yada yada yada. No one knows better than he how to throw the Punjab lasso, for he is the king of stranglers, even as he is the prince of conjurers.
Yeah, he had plenty of time to explain it to him. They were holding whole conversations. Yeah, he did keep saying it though. It was honestly, it's kind of weird to me that my favorite part of the book isn't everything that happened in the underground part, because a lot of fun, weird things happened while they were trying to hunt down Christina.
Yeah.
And, they were making plots back and forth, like, here's what we'll do, and here's what we'll do if this happens, and here's how we'll get her out of here. And the Persian has a little bit of inside knowledge of what the different rooms are. So he's like, we can't do this, and we can't do that. And you're thinking there's going to be some great plan here for them ultimately to just end up locked in a room and nearly die and only rescued because,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here it is. Hang it, muttered the Persian. I don't know what they are looking for, but they might easily find us. Let us get away, quick. Your hand up, sir, ready to fire. Bend your arm, more, that's it. Hand at the level of your eye, as though you were fighting a duel and waiting for the word to fire. Oh, leave your pistol in your pocket. Quick, come along, downstairs, level of your eye. Question of life or death. Here, this way, these stairs. Oh, what a duel, sir, what a duel.
And the best part about that is the entire premise was that the Persian is just like, yeah, he could be anywhere just watching us waiting. And so you're thinking, so all of the stuff that they did that would have involved them sneaking around anywhere was pointless. If he was so sure that they would never know if he was watching them, why were they sneaking anywhere?
Yeah.
I don't know. We could just blame the Persian for that fault of reasoning. But I mean, that is kind of, and the best part is it was Raoul's fault, because Raoul just couldn't control the inner Frenchman in himself, where he was like, "That's Christina. We must rescue her." And so he made Eric aware of their presence.
Yeah.
Although I feel like there was a thing that kind of made it ambiguous whether he knew they were there already or not, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly.
But yeah, get yourself a good laugh. Grab the book. Give it a read.
I mean, yeah, it's available,
It's free.
It's out of copyright. Even the English translation is out of copyright. So, you can go check the book out for free and get a piece of classic literature, and, you can kind of see for yourself both the good points and the bad points of this book. I think it's worth a look. Especially since the first half is so good, right? Like, the first half is good enough that you'll be like, oh, cool, I like the first half of this book. And then the second half, you'll be like, okay, this was a little bit silly, but, I mean, it still wasn't bad. It was just silly.
Yeah, I mean, it has its ups and downs a lot more at the end of the book. It's like, okay, this is kind of dumb, but this is kind of cool. This is kind of dumb. This is kind of cool. And to be fair, you can blame a lot of the problems on the characters and not the writer. Like the way he wrote the characters, it was their fault that things happened. They were just kind of incompetent once in a while.
Often, yes.
Well, should we sign off then? Have we done our due diligence for Phantom of the Opera? Kind of given people a taste?
So. It's one of those things where, like, it's hard. So it's much more disorganized than, say, Dracula. Like, when we talked about Dracula, we could go through bit by bit, piece by piece, and kind of talk about things. In this book, it kind of jumps around a lot too, which is one of those things that makes it harder to kind of nail down and really poke at, rather than just kind of telling a few stories here and there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think we've given a pretty good explanation of what the book is like. We've talked about some of its good points, some of its bad points. We've explained, why it's worth looking at, even if you think it is a little bit silly and melodramatic in places. It still has had a great effect on other literature, and and it's been adapted a million times into a very popular things. So it's definitely got something. Maybe you and I are just missing it, but it's definitely got something. So if you want to figure out what that something is, give it a look, and the only thing it's going to cost you is a little bit of time.
And I guess our due diligence here to just offer a bit of our opinion on writing. I guess you could say that it's a good read to give you an idea of something that can be classical literature and still be kind of silly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that too. And I don't know. I feel like that's enough for someone to go on. It's a book you can read, and you can.
It's a question of range, right? Like,
yeah.
This shows you how far something can go down the silliness, path, and still end up classic literature.
Yeah. So I guess in closing, all that's really left to say is keep your gun level with your eyes.
Level with your eyes.
Yeah, always keep your gun level with your eyes. Keep your stick on the ice. And remember, if the women don't find you handsome, they should at least find you handy. Oh, wait, no, that's red-green.
That's red-green.
Yeah.
A simple and easy to mistake to make.
Easy enough. Gaston Leroux, red, green. It's basically what Gaston Leroux means in French, right?
I mean, it's not LeBlanc, so I have to assume it means a color, though.
Well, that's how you know it's a fake. Every last name in France is LeBlanc. So if it's not LeBlanc, it's a fake name. It's a pen name. Gaston Leroux is probably actually, I don't know, Jerry LeBlanc.
Gaston Legreen.
Yes. Redston Legreen.
All right. Well, thanks for sticking with us, everybody, and we will see you all next week with some more writing fun. Just to kind of provide a little bit of a preview, you've read a book recently, Justin. Is that right?
I'm halfway through the book. I'll have it ready for when we do our next thing. I'm reading The Science of Discworld.
Yes.
There's five of them, actually. I'm reading the first one right now.
Okay.
And a brief bit of background. It was written. They were written starting in 1998, and they're a combination of writing by Terry Pratchett, who pens the story of his Discworld Wizards of Unseen University, creating Roundworld, which is essentially Earth. And well, it is supposed to be Earth in the story, and each alternating chapter goes from telling a little bit more of the story to the next chapter is written by one of two scientists in this particular one. I think it's the same three people for all 5 books. Terry Pratchett and... Oh, I've got it right here. So we've got Terry Pratchett, and it's with Ian Stewart and Jack Cohen. And each alternating chapter is story and then a discussion of the science of some of the things that are going on in that chapter and the chapter that's coming up by Ian Stewart or Jack Cohen, who kind of... I'm assuming they either adopted or... were helped by Pratchett to... They write in a I'm explaining some science to you kind of way, but they use Terry Pratchett style humor in it. And it's a little bit different than you'd expect because they're not just giving you some boring explanation where if you're a layman and you're not that interested, you might want to walk away from it. No. This is completely different. They genuinely dive into like funny ways of explaining things. So, well, I guess we can save it for when we actually go to do it, but they're interesting books, or at least the one I'm reading so far. Long story short,
it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be very fun, and we might have to do all 5. I've got 3 of them so far. I've got to dig up the other 2, and we're going to make it a thing. So,
all right, I'm down with that. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, that should be pretty fun.
All right, see you later, everybody. Have a good week.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.